All right, we're gonna, one of us that are here, we're gonna go through this engine repair stuff, because y'all are in engine repair. And this is just a metal machine's what it is. You can see the various different parts of it laying out here, you know. You basically got your engine block there, and there's your heads, and you got your valves, you got your little push rods and the lifter, excuse me, push rods and rocker arms, and pistons and rings, everything laid out, you know, it's all the little parts right there. So you've got your different configurations. You got a V5, you got a V6, you got a V8, you got a flat 6, flat 4, boxer twin, straight 5. Notice how they are, the companion cylinders on straight 5, you got 1 and 4 that are companions, and then all, you know, these other ones over here. You know, that one there is not exactly a companion to those, but it's now they are, one way or another. You got that going on. Whoops, went too far back. Long blocks, horizontal opposed. That's an old Volkswagen Bug engine, air cooled. You got your heads out here on the outside. You got your pistons laying in there sideways. The crankshaft and the camshaft are all up in that block. There's your V configuration. That's a Y block there. And then you got your slant configuration, kind of like that Toyota engine out there on the stand. You know, the engine is laying in there at a slant like that. And Volkswagens were, some of the Volkswagen Rabbits and stuff were like that. They had a slant engine in them. The old white forklift we used to have around here, if you remember now, it would have a Volkswagen engine in it, Volkswagen gas burners. And then there's your straight I configuration. You can have a 6 or an 8, it's just a straight 6. Short block is this. Basically, you're going to have usually the rotating assemblies in there, camshaft, and the pistons. That's a short block. This right here, the long block, comes with the heads on it. One day there was a guy that was a sort of a janitor or something working at the Ford place over, and me and one of the truck mechanics were standing there outside the parts room talking about something, and he stepped outside and he goes, I wanted to order an engine from the parts room for my wife's van, and they were asking me if it had a short block or a long block in it, and I don't know how to answer that question. Well, see, they were asking him basically if he wanted this or that. This is going to cost a little more because it comes with the heads. On this one here, you recondition your heads and you put them on this short block. So that's the difference between a short block and a long block. Now the bores have got to be perfectly round and not tapered if you're going to build one upright. And this is where the stroke is made right here. The way the crankshaft is, I just got the very end of a crankshaft here. And how far this is from that is what's going to be determined how far up and down the piston moves. That's the stroke. That's to do with your displacement and all that. And the bore measurement's right here. And so if you've got a bore that's bigger, in other words, if you take these two measurements, let's say that the stroke of the thing, the bore is bigger than the stroke, right? And that's going to be an over square engine. And if it's the bore is littler and the stroke is longer, that's an under square engine, as I remember. You can get those mixed up. One way or another, short stroke gives you a lot of fast revving. Long stroke gives you more torque. Because think about if you got a crank, if you got a long crank, you got more torque, but you don't have much speed, right? But if you got a little short crank, you can turn it fast, but you don't have a lot of power. There's much power. So basically, the stroke is determined by the crankshaft, not the length of the rod. And once again, here's the crankshaft, and that's what it looks like in there, laid up in the block. And these are your main bearings right here. This is what it spins in. It spins in these bearings right here that are all in line with one another. These right here are what your rods run. And you can count the number of journals, 1, 2, 3, 4. Look at that, that's a 4-cylinder in it. 1, 2, 3, 4. And how many main bearings you got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It spins in 5 mains. And that's a good strong engine right there. Now this one right here is going to have more than that. 1, 2, it's going to be a 6-cylinder here, it looks like. Anyway, doesn't matter. Piston and ring. What's wrong with this picture? Anybody get a good look at that picture there? Tell me what's wrong with it. There's a problem right there. Anybody that builds engines can tell you what's wrong with that picture as soon as they see it. You see those gaps on those compression rings? Mm-hmm. They should not be stacked right on top of one another. They ought to be on opposite sides of the piston. But if you've got them stacked, you're going to have some compression loss there and too much blowback. Here's your wrist pin here. You got a connecting rod, graphite or other coating, because that thing, whenever that piston is going up and down, you're going to see a lot of the scuff wear on these skirts right here. These little piston you got right there. See? Now there's your bearing right there. It's several layers of metal, and it's made for that. Back in the day, they used to use some Babbitt, some lead Babbitt, and they would put run Babbitt in there, and then they would shave it out and measure the clearances and make bearings out of Babbitt. But nowadays the bearings are a whole lot tougher than they always used to be. Now, here's a little story about this. Always measure the ring gap during a rebuild. Before you ever do anything, once you've got if you're gonna build one up the right way, you need to block board 30 over and go ahead and get you a new set of pistons. And when you get the rings for it, you're gonna put those rings down in a cylinder, like you see that one right there. You see that piston ring he's got in the cylinder? Got the piston ring, and you wanna measure that. You ought to have a little over 1/1000th of an inch of ring gap in there, depending on whatever spec you're looking for. If they're too close together, if those ring gaps are too close together, the rings will get hot. It will start up and run, and as rings get hot, they'll tighten up in there, and then the engine will quit running. And you have to let it cool off before it'll start up again. I've known of people that done that. I mean, they actually just went ahead and built the engine on faith and managed to, get the pistons in there, and they had to pull it back down. Now, if you don't have any ring gap, you take the ring, you use a fowle, and you make yourself a little ring gap. Believe it or not, you have to do that a lot of the time. There was a boy that was building an engine here one time for his own car. And before he started putting everything together, I said, you need to check the ring gap on this. And when he checked the ring gap, he didn't have any. So he saved himself all kinds of problems by checking the ring gap first. Don't neglect to check the ring gap. Get too excited about putting it back together, get too big of a hurry, you can make yourself a mess and have to make much extra work. Checking new bearing clearances when you put it together, it's also good to check that. Use plastic gauge. You see this waxy string? You take a piece of this waxy string and you put it on the bearing surface, and then you torque it down just like you would if you put it back together, and you take it back apart, and you're going to see how much it squished that spring. And when you compare it, if it's got 1.5 thousandths of clearance, it's going to squish it that wide. See that right there? If it's got 2 thousandths, which is too much, it won't squish it any wider than that. 3 thousandths, it squishes it more if you've got less clearance. And 1.5 thousandths is about all you're going to be permitted to have on that. Here's one they're measuring on the bearing, and red is like for bigger clearances and all that, but the green is typically what you're going to use on an engine. All right, so. All right, here's your camshaft and valve train. That's the camshaft there. You see those lobes right there? This is basically giving you an idea of what this is showing you overlap and all that. Of course, you got timing chain. It's double roller timing chain. This is the cam in the block engine right here. There's your lifters. These are roller lifters here, and the roller lifters are basically going to have a little jig of some kind that's going to hold them so that they don't turn sideways and chew everything up. If sometimes a roller lifter, the little part that's holding it will break or whatever, let it turn sideways, it'll chew up the camshaft and everything. And of course, here's your valves right here. That's what they look like. And your push rods, valve springs, all that kind of stuff. This is not complicated. Overhead cams, dual overhead cams. It'll be complicated if you have to build. I'm talking about build from scratch, but since you can buy the parts and put it together, it's not that bad. Dual overhead cams, you got 2 camshafts laying in there. The little Toyota engine out there on the stand is a dual overhead cam, but it's only got 1 gear on the outside, and they actually are geared together inside under the valve cover. And those camshafts turn opposite directions because they're geared together instead of chained together, right? And these right here both turn the same way. And basically right here, you see these little adjustments right here? You see that? You loosen that screw, you loosen that nut, you use that screw and a feeler gauge to set your valve lash. That's only on the ones that don't have automatic lash adjusters, which would be hydraulic. On this one right here, you got to set the valve lash periodically. It's not too hard to do, but you do have to get it so that the valve's closed, and then you're going to run it up under there. We used to do on those Volkswagen bug engines when I was at the dealership. They were little shims on the cam followers, and we had to turn them through and have a go, no-go feeler gauge.
Only this on you dig it.
Thank you, sir. But anyway, dual overhead cams are right there. But remember that you're going to see those on some. If you see that valve adjustment is really important. If it's too tight, it can hold the valve open and start burning the valves. You don't want that, and you lose compression that way too. Single overhead cams right there. You notice this doesn't have any adjustment. It's just running on these roller rockers on that particular type of camshaft there. Now some of you guys tore apart that Dodge Neon, Chrysler Neon head. Not the head, but the whole engine. That one's got 4 valves per cylinder, but it's only got 1 camshaft, which is pretty interesting because they have extra loads on the same camshaft. The heads are the hottest running non-moving part. So you got a really hot, cylinder heads get really hot. 2 valves per cylinder, 4 valves per cylinder. See how you got more breathing area there? And these will typically be overhead cam there. And that one right there You got 3 valves per cylinder, that's like off an F-150, and this is a Hemi head, you know, hemispherical combustion chamber. Have you seen the ones on the Dodge trucks and all that says, yeah, it's a Hemi? You know what I'm saying? You ever seen that? You'll see it, now that I've said that, you'll start noticing on trucks. You know, they'll actually talk about, you know, Hemi engines and all that, and it's basically talking about that, the shape of that combustion chamber, and Chrysler made that, you know, Dodge and Chrysler made that thing. Driving the camshafts, they have your timing belts, timing chains on your, you might notice some of these, they've got some of the different colored links on the chains and marks on the gear so you can get them in time and all that. These are not so terribly hard to do. They look like a booger bear. The part that gives away on these is these plastic slides. They'll have a tendency to come apart in there. You've also got tensioners that push on those. This one right here, some of the timing belts have got a tensioner that's it's not operated with engine oil, but it's sort of like a glorified, tougher version of, you know, the hood springs, like you open up and got the hydraulic hood springs. You know, they got a tensioner that's like that. And whenever you get the new timing kit, it'll come with all of these gears. Well, that's the water pump right there. Like you can get a kit that'll come with a water pump and that gear. Well, sometimes they'll come with that gear and have a belt and they'll have a brand new tensioner and all that stuff to put in there. And after you've done a couple or 3 of those, they're just really not that big of a deal. They're not that bad. And you know, of course, these right here, you just basically got to watch what you're doing when you're lining all that stuff up. Oil pumps come in many flavors. This is a Gerotor style oil pump, and this is a vane style oil pump. That's a crescent type oil pump right there. See a crescent in there. And this one right here is sort of like what they've got you showing you a sort of a semi-transparent cover so you see what it looks like in there. And what happens is whenever you turn that oil pump and it opens up passages on one side, it pulls oil in, and by the time it gets over where it's squeezing those passages down, it's pushing the oil out when it goes out a different way. And relief valves are really, really important. If the relief valve is stuck open and the spring is broken, there will be no oil pressure and the engine will be destroyed. I knew one guy that was a instructor at another school, and he had rebuilt an entire engine because the bearings got wiped out on it. And when he cranked it up, it starved for oil and messed the engine up that he had just built. And when you pull the timing cover off of that one, you could see that the valve, relief valve was stuck. And if your relief valve's stuck open, if it's not going to push against that spring, you ain't gonna have no oil pressure. I'm telling you, it's really important. This one right here is a vane type. This is rare. This is a variable displacement oil pump right there. Don't hardly ever see that. Don't anything. This is the way they were on you know, all the old V8 engines and all, like the Chevy and everything out there. That's what they look like under there. See, that's when you got the engine upside down on the stand, you're putting it on, that's the oil pump right there. This is the oil pump off of a Toyota that's driven by the timing belt. The relief valve's right in there on this one. On this kind of oil pump, the relief valve built in there too. It's a little spring and a plunger. And whenever the oil pump's pumping, it's having to push that spring against that plunger to open up a port. That's what gives you your pressure. This is on a Crown Vicky engine right here. A little holding tool actually holds the crankshaft while you're putting the timing chains on. But the simple fact is, you got your oil pump right there. And naturally, here's the oil pump, that screen. If that screen gets stopped up with sludge, it's going to starve it to death and it's going to kill it. That's the way it is. Oil galleries are drilled all over the place. You know, you got basically your oil filter adapter, oil pressure sensors down there on this particular one. And you got this is going to your hydraulic chain tensioner. This drains down to the sump. You know, and the last thing it's going to get oil is going to be the valve train. That's the very last thing it starts. Well, that's why I've heard that whenever the oil is low on an engine, it'll start clattering, clacking, clacking. You know, you hear the valves clattering. You pour some oil in it, you know, they'll start doing better. They basically will give you an idea when you're low on oil sometimes if you hear them, you know, lifters clacking. And not a good idea to let that happen. This is a 1998 Chrysler 2.7 liter. We got one of these engines over in the other shop. But you got the two cams chained together, and the thing that gets some people in trouble on these and on some of the other Dodge engines is you'll actually, the timing chains on some of these Dodge engines, like the ones in the pickups particularly, the timing chains, even from the parts store, cost nearly $500. Real expensive. And also, when you get that gear, it comes with that gear and that cam, see them little holes in there? If you're ever in a situation where you're having to put one of those on, when you get the camshaft out of the, you know, the timing chain stuff out of the box, you better compare what you've got to this, because I have known guys that put that timing chain all the way in there and wound up with a vehicle that wouldn't start, because these little holes were not the same, because there's two different ones of those. See what I mean? So if you put one in that's got a different hole pattern here, you see 2, 2, 3, 3, you know, this kind of thing, they'll have different hole pattern. And if and the engine controller is expecting to see this one and it sees one on the chain you put in that was a different one, we've actually took them out of the box back here, going to put a timing chain in them, we found out we had the wrong daggone chain. See what I mean? So it's really important to pay attention to that. And not really, you know, the water pump on this one is actually driven by the timing chain. And so that makes you want to cry if you have to change one of those. And so, this is a splitting a 4-cylinder in half. All right. So what we got right here, if we cut it in half, you see the crankshaft here, you see the companion cylinders here and here and here and here. These cylinders right here go up and down together, these go up and down together, but they do this when they're like that, 180 degrees between firing events, and basically the nice little cutout job that they did this, you know, you can see the half the pistons in there, you know, and, but anyway. These have got gaskets and seals. See the gaskets and seals? Right there you got, these are multi-layer gaskets and all. I don't even know what engine that's for, but it was a cool looking little shot of gaskets and everything. And pay attention to what all these little seals are for. You know, this look like they go in the ends of the valve covers here where the camshaft caps are. These will typically be exhaust gaskets or gaskets that are for hot gases. If you see gaskets that are coated with graphite, it's because they got aluminum on one side and steel on the other. And whenever they heat and expand at different rates, they do this all the time. If you don't have a graphite coated gasket, it'll mess it up. A lot of times when you're putting the heads on, you might notice that you're supposed to torque it to a certain amount and then go another, you know, 90 degrees or whatever on every bolt. Some of them you're supposed to torque them, release the torque on all of them, and go back and retorque them. I mean, just pay attention to your torque specs, make sure you do it in the right order. Head gaskets can fail multiple ways. You can have compression leaks to the crankcase, which makes smoking and blow-by. You can basically have blown to the coolant port. You got water in oil, you have water in oil that way. That doesn't happen very often usually. Compression leak into the water is fairly common. You get one good and hot, you're going to have that more than one place. Blown between two cylinders, you're basically going to have two cylinders adjacent to one another that have no compression. Blown to outside coolant leak, you can see them leaking on the outside, and then blown to the outside, the oil is going through here as a splash oil. You can have them leaking the oil on the outside. Now, overhead cam has high pressure passage through the head gasket. Since the camshaft in an OHC engine needs to be pressurized lube, there is leak potential where that oil passes through the head gasket. And this right here, they got a story I can tell about that one. You'll probably see that picture again later. I got it later in this same thing. You put dye in there, hold your black light up there, you can see where it's coming from. That was actually a leak where the high pressure leak going there feeding the camshaft on that Dodge Stratus was leaking all right there. And there was another shop that diagnosed that as a rear main seal. They were going to pull the transmission out of the car and put a rear main because it was dripping off the bottom of the engine back there and back to the transmission. They assumed it was the main seal. And when we washed everything out, put the dye in there, cranked it up, drove it down the road and back, got under there, and it was coming from under the head gasket. So we had to pull the head off, put the head gasket on to stop that oil leak. Puff of smoke on the first start means you got, or if it's smoking in idle, oil smoke, that basically is going to be valve stem seal issues. This right here is the tool that you use to take the valve stems off if you're changing them on the car. Valve stem seal looks like that right there. Then this is what the valve stem seal deposits look like. Look at that and remember it. When you see them puffy deposits that look like ice cream on there, only they're really hard, that is valve stem seal leakage. Every time it leaks in there, it burns a little bit of that oil off there and it continues to make deposits until they puff up like that. If they puff up to the point to where they're just about completely stopped up, you may have a surge or a partial misfire. Intake valve stem seal starting to leak, oil's drawn to the intake because you got low pressure here, and the pressure here is lower than there, and it pulls that oil down there. But it can also just trickle down there and drip, and it's puddled up on top of the valve. When you crank it up, a bunch of oil smoke goes all over the parking lot. And so we've had several of them, we've had to put valve stem seals in because of that kind of thing. And make sure you get good valve stem seals too. These come with a headset, with a head gasket set. And you need to make doggone sure those valve stem seals are changed. Where typically you're going to rework the head anyway and check it for flatness and cracks and all that. Some valve stem seal jobs are harder than others. This is one we did back there on a Toyota. I built this thing, that part right there I bought, but I had built all the rest of this stuff so we could do this. The Toyota place charges over $2,000 parts and labor to pull the head off a Toyota and put it back on. And if they've got valve stem seal leakage, they want to pull the head off, send it to the machine shop, and then get it back and put it back on. A couple of $1,000 for that repair. We bought the valve stem seals and did it right there in the car. When we got through, the valve stem seals were down in that hole because it's got them cam followers and all, you know. But anyway, that's what we did here. And like I say, that thing is, I drilled a bunch of holes in a plate, got it where you could bolt it down. This old bent C-clamp, and I put this, you know, ground that piece out so that you could turn that C-clamp thing down and push that valve. Then you reach your magnet and get the little keepers out, and lift that valve stick, pop that seal out of there, stick a new seal down there, bump it in there with a socket, and put it all back together, do the whole thing. You need to have air pressure in that hole though, so the valves will stay closed and you won't drop one down in the cylinder. Okay? If you're ever doing valve stem seals in the vehicle, you gotta have air pressure in the cylinder to keep the valve closed. Have it on top dead center in that cylinder, both valves closed, you put it in there. Pumping water, driven by the FEAD. Who knows what FEAD is? Front end accessory drive. That's your belt system, okay? Timing belt, timing chain, impeller can face either way. You notice the impeller on this one is facing in. The reaction surface is built into the pump. This one's facing out. The reaction surface is built into the cover. Now some of these you got to take hoses off to get them on. On some of them you don't. That one there, you got to pull hoses off to change that pump. This one here, it's got an O-ring. You just pop the pump off, put it back on, but it's pulled by the timing belt. This one right here's got a plastic impeller. I've got one of those over there somewhere that I pulled off of a Dodge Caravan that was overheating. The guy couldn't figure it out. And you can grab that plastic impeller and hold it with your hand and just spin it. In other words, you can hold this part and you can spin that freely. So the impeller wasn't even pumping the water. We had a white Ford pickup in here one time that the impeller had come off the water pump. It would idle without overheating and sitting still, but when you try to drive it away before you even got halfway to the entrance of the parking lot, it's trying to overheat. You know, it's a crazy thing. I thought it would overheat it just idling, but that one didn't. Water pump failures or a weep hole. Anytime you see a water dripping down that, you know, basically you're looking up from the bottom of the vehicle. You're under there and you see water running down there. It's got, if that clamp's not loose, it's got about a 95% chance that it's coming out of that weep hole. And there's a weep hole right there. See, that's where this comes from, where that seal leaks. Now there's a couple of different ways water pumps can fail. They can fail, well, there's several different ways actually. If there's a lot of rust in the system and the engine is not, if you pull the heater hoses off and you put a clear hose in between the heater hoses to circle out the heater core and you crank it up and there's not a lot of water going through there like a fire hose, then that water pump ain't pushing water. You know what I'm saying? So you got to make sure that the water pump will push the water. If these impellers, and I got one over there somewhere that I'd have to dig up. Now right over there is one. Let's grab this one. This water pump right here, this is two water pumps right here. Yeah, that's one. It's going to be, look at that. Look at those two water pumps. That one is rusted out and there's too much space between the impeller and that reaction surface, and that one was not even, the problem that one had when it came in here was it didn't have any heat. She said, I got no heat. So when we took the heater hoses off and looped them out, there was nothing flowing through them. You see how much space there is between the impeller and the reaction surface? That makes it not work. Now that's a pump that doesn't have that extra space. You can compare those two pumps and get an idea of how it's supposed to look. You ought not to have but about 20 thousandths of an inch between the ends of those things. I had one time that was, I bought it from the parts store, put it in this Dodge Plymouth Volare back in 1984 I was working on, and the darn thing was running too hot. Not running hot, but running hotter than he wanted to see it run. And when I pulled the water pump I had put on there back off, and I measured, got another new water pump, they hadn't pressed the impeller on there far enough to have the right clearance. It was making it run hot, and I had to put another different water pump on it. But you can see that, look at the difference in the space between those impellers and reaction surface on that one and on the one he's got. You can see there's a heck of a lot of difference there. That rusted out pump was making it run hot. But if you see water coming out of that weep hole, go ahead and put your water pump on there. Oil leaks can be from the splash or sump area, which would be valve covers, intake, wall pan, timing cover. If it's a pressurized leak, like this one I showed you earlier, that one there's coming from the oil pump. Now the story behind that one there was, my son was coming over here, a little Toyota Camry that he had, and he went by this shop over there where he lives up there in Georgia, and they charged him $450 to put an oil pan gasket on it for an oil leak. So he came, on the way down here, he had to add a quart of oil about every 150 miles. because he kept running low on oil, still leaking. And what they had misfired on was it wasn't leaking from the oil pan, it was leaking from the oil pump. This was that very car. And we basically put, or no, it may have been a different car we did, but anyway, that's the oil pump gasket on that little triangular oil pump that's driven by the timing belt on the Camrys. It was leaking oil from there, but it was running off the oil pan, so it looked like the oil pan gasket was leaking. But it was a pressure leak. This is a pressure leak, this is a pressure leak, and a lot of these others are splash leaks. You know, like if it's coming from the oil pan or the valve covers, it's typically a splash oil leak. Yeah, but there's pressure leaks too. All right, intake, compression, power, and exhaust. Remember that. They got to be working right for the ICE to run right. ICE stands for internal combustion engine. An unrestricted flow of clean air is needed. Tight combustion chamber, good rings and valves, good fuel supply quality, good spark timing, a free breathing exhaust system with less than 2 psi of back pressure. If one is complaining, that catalytic converter you see up there that stopped up. Let me see this water pump here. Let me see that one. This water pump here is the one I was talking about that had the really bad rusted out impeller that wasn't moving any water. And that's the other one that, you know, got a good tight thing. Just for, so everybody knows what I was talking about. Free breathing exhaust system. That one over there, that catalytic converter right there, if you look up in it, it stopped up, it came off a Trailblazer, like an 04 Trailblazer. And the guy said, you know, got low power and doesn't feel like it should anymore. And so I took the oxygen sensor out, screwed a fitting in there I built, put a pressure gauge on it, and it had to have 5 pounds of pressure. So we got that catalytic converter off, and you can look up in that thing, it's clogged up pretty doggone bad. And we got another catalytic converter that was a Walker Universal. It was made to fit that one. Actually, it wasn't Universal, it was made for that one, but it was a weld-in unit, and we welded in there. You gotta be careful when you're welded in there, because if you don't do it right, your exhaust won't fit anymore. If you just cut it off and just weld the other one in there, when you put it up in there, the pipes won't be right. So you gotta put it up in there and tack weld it, and then, you know, or actually mark it and then tack weld it, make sure it'll bolt up, and then if it does, you can take it down and then sew it up. What we did on that. Engine repair and engine performance are comrades in arms. Variable valve timing and variable valve lift and gasoline direct injection are all over the place. Get ready for that. Hybrid vehicles still have internal combustion engines, and then there's telematics, self-driving vehicles and everything. This business is not for dummies. It's also not for lazy wimps. You know what I mean? And I hope some of the guys that have started these jobs out here, and you know, of course, this is Labor Day weekend, and usually Labor Day people will take a day off before and a day off after so they can have a good long weekend. I've seen that. That's the oldest trick in the book. You know what I mean? And of course, I don't like being anywhere except at work when I'm supposed to be at work. You know what I mean? But anyway, that's the end of that. Huh?
I said money.
Yep. Yeah. Did you have a good time?
Yep.
All right then. So, anybody got any questions or comments about that? That was kind of a flying trip. You know what I mean? But there was a lot of information packed in there, and it's stuff that everybody needs to know. And
So
so,
somebody in the shop.
yep.